Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining this NSA webinar titled Anonymous Reporting Systems. Today's webinar is supported by the COPS Office through our Cooperative Agreement for School Safety and Security. Thank you to the COPS Office for your support. Before I introduce you to our facilitator today, I will give you a quick overview of NSA. Chartered in 1940, NSA is a professional association dedicated to serving the Office of Sheriff and its affiliates through education, training, and general law enforcement resources. NSA provides these resources and advocacy for sheriffs, law enforcement, criminal justice professionals, and their communities. There are currently over 3,000 sheriffs nationwide. Our membership base includes over 13,000 individual members, including sheriffs, deputies, other law enforcement officers, public safety professionals, and concerned citizens. This webinar will be recorded today and posted on our website at sheriffs.org. We will have time for questions at the end of the webinar, but please keep yourself muted at all times and use the chat box to submit your questions. Please email me at kbarksdale@sheriffs.org if your question does not get answered during our live webinar. Our facilitator today is Jeff Allison. Jeff began his law enforcement career as a trooper with the Maryland State Police and then served as a field training officer and juvenile detective with the Aurora, Colorado Police Department. He then moved back to Washington and completed a 30-year career with the U.S. Department of Justice, with the last years serving as a special advisor for school and campus public safety at FBI headquarters. Jeff now staffs and serves as the chairperson for the COPS Office School Safety Working Group. In that capacity, Jeff helped author the 10 Essential Actions Report, which is the basis for today's webinar. And with that, I'll pass it over to you, Jeff.
Thank you, Christy, and thank you everyone for joining us. I think at last count, we were at about 170 folks registered for the webinar, and that's fantastic. Our topic for today's webinar, anonymous reporting systems, is definitely timely, given that we have more students returning to learn in person, and we know that many of them are coming back to school with mental and behavioral health challenges that went unaddressed while they were away from school. It's also timely because May is Mental Health Awareness Month, so it fits right in. The last thing I would point out is that this is National Police Memorial Week. You may not be able to see it, but I've got my National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial tie on. We are recognizing today those federal, state, and local law enforcement officers, correctional officers, and others who made the ultimate sacrifice to protect their communities. So we're thinking about them as we do this webinar. On the topic of anonymous reporting systems, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the proportion of children and adolescents visit to emergency rooms for mental health crises has increased substantially during the pandemic. And we already knew that the youth suicide rate in America increased almost 60% between 2007 and 2018. Thanks to the U.S. Secret Service National Threat Assessment Center, we know that most cases have completed and averted incidents of targeted school violence. The perpetrators showed concerning behavior beforehand and often leaked their plans to others. In many cases, that leakage occurred on social media. Fortunately, we do have tools for preventing targeted school violence, and one of them is anonymous reporting systems. The National Averted School Violence Database, which is funded by the U.S. Department of Justice, Office of Community Policing Services, and administered by the National Police Foundation, has numerous cases where critical information was received by a tip line and then shared to help us prevent injuries and the loss of life. So with that background, here are your learning objectives for today's webinar. I won't read them to you. You can see them. And I do believe we're going to be able to cover all of them. We are fortunate to have with us a national subject matter expert on anonymous reporting systems. Susan Payne was the first school resource officer in the Colorado Springs Police Department. She founded and served as the first executive director for SafetyTel Colorado. Susan serves as a special advisor for the University of Colorado Center for the Study and Prevention of Violence. She is the executive director of Safety, Security, and Emergency Management for the Cheyenne Mountain School District in Colorado. So Susan is on the front lines every day doing this work. In her spare time, Susan is a nationally renowned and highly sought after subject matter expert on anonymous reporting systems. And on a personal note, I've had the privilege of working with Susan on school safety initiatives going back to my days at the FBI. I can tell you that her depth of knowledge and energy for this work are inspiring. When there's trouble in paradise, Susan is one of the people schools and law enforcement agencies call first. So it's particularly gratifying to me, Susan, that you can be here with us today to share your insights. To help set the stage, I would point out to everybody, if you're not aware of it already, that in January of 2019, the National Institute of Justice published a report titled School Tip Line Toolkit, a Blueprint for Implementation and Sustainability. The report was co-produced by the Oregon State Police and RTI International, and they relied heavily on the work and lessons learned by Susan during her time with Safe to Tell Colorado. So Susan, we are looking forward to learning from your insights on anonymous reporting systems. Please take it away from snowy Colorado Springs.
Hey, thanks, Jeff. And thanks, everybody. We kind of did a little rehearsal yesterday, so I'm going to start with this because I'm kind of back in my hometown working, which is awesome. But this picture popped up. This is, I don't want to say, I mean, I had a 28-year law enforcement career. So this is probably in the 90s, but I just wanted to share, like going back, you know, my dad, my uncles, all law enforcement, my brother, so big law enforcement family. So thank you to all of you for your service that are on this call. I want to kind of jump into it because really in my career, what really led me to this was I was on the FBI Fugitive or Safe Streets Task Force, and part of what I also ran was Crime Stoppers, introduced to that. And I just have to put out what was posted yesterday, you know, a long homicide from or kidnapping from 86, either one. So that was really our method in law enforcement of really raising public awareness, paying cash rewards if someone needed to give us tips, and making sure there was anonymity. Many of you know Crime Stoppers is an anonymous system. So I just wanted to set the stage of really the history of this. For me, when I ran Crime Stoppers, we started a program that was Stop It Before It Happens. We really used prevention principles. And it was a student-based Crime Stopper system, really. It was really the first one in the country that focused on prevention and early intervention. But that was in the late 90s. And after doing a briefing to the state of Colorado on the success of that and the prevented tragedies involving young people, 2 weeks later, we had the Columbine tragedy in Colorado. So for us, that really changed everything. Obviously, we're looking at photos of the victims that lost their life. There were many more that were traumatized that day, and a lot of lessons learned. So much of what you'll hear today is not only lessons learned from, you know, really boots on the ground, street law enforcement activities, but also key stakeholders in these events, those that survived, those that have experienced trauma, and for any of us that have been involved. And honestly, you know, we had a mass shooting, domestic violence related in Colorado Springs this weekend, and the Center for the Study and Prevention of Violence, where I've worked with Dr. Del Elliott and Beverly Kingston for 20 years. The Boulder shooting was just within blocks of our office. So, you know, it's really hitting home as to where we are today. But I do want to take us back because this study was so relevant in the work. And part of what we took was the work with the Secret Service at the time. I had the opportunity to be part of the bystander study, and that was the interviews of individuals that had been involved in shootings, witnessed them, or had information prior to the attack that they did not share or that they did that was not followed up on. So let's just take a little review through history, and that is 4 out of 5 shootings. At the time of the bystander study, there was somebody that had information that had been shared, could have prevented it. I wanted to also narrow down that those precipitators to violence in that study really included that 93% of those perpetrators had concerning behavior before the attack. 59% of the incident, more than one person had knowledge of the attack. So of those with prior knowledge, most of those are peers or perpetrators. So I would really encourage you to always keep that handy. Certainly the newest studies are updated. And I just wanted to give you some of the graphics that'll be in this presentation. So as much as we go into artificial intelligence, and many of us are looking at social media, keyword watch lists right now, our best detectors really out there are human detectors. And I can't tell you how many times Dr. Elliott and myself have come in the aftermath of tragedies that we've responded to, like Sandy Hook or Red Lake or Virginia Tech, and really discussed what kind of technology and equipment is so important, because there's often an effort to look at metal detectors and other things, but we still know there's a human factor, and we've got to make sure that we're providing those on the front lines really a voice to get us information when we need it. So as we look at it, when we look at, this is a slide from the Secret Service, and I know Lena's on here. I know I followed her because she was here last time, but they're rarely sudden impulsive attacks. So sometimes the key messages in the media give us the wrong idea. So we have to look at, what is the updated guidance? How are we vetting it in history? What is the profile? And who engaged in these acts of violence, and really why? What were their motives? What was the foundation? What was going on in their lives? And what were our opportunities to prevent? Keep going through this, the behavior. And the reason I'm pointing this out is we're also having a national conversation with police chiefs and sheriffs and others around the country of when should law enforcement get involved in an anonymous report. And what I would tell you is that for many of us that ran the drug tip lines back in the day, and we would review the intel that came through our voicemail of someone that left a message at the beep, is 94% of those were basically just deleted. We couldn't use that information. And that was because if we don't have a live exchange to gather all the needed information, we're not going to get enough information for those that respond in the field to really follow up and do their job. So when we look at personal loss or failures, or those that were struggling, considering suicide, we have to really evaluate to what level is the threshold where we ask people to make a report. And specific to schools, young people know long before adults what's taking place in schools. So when we're trying to describe our system, we are not looking for 911 level emergencies to be reported. We're looking at an early warning system. What were the warning signs that we know in many cases that went unreported, and how do we get those reported so that we can get a multidisciplinary response to support that student? So just going through here, again, I just wanted to overlay what we really built with Safe to Tell. And I'm going to get back to what was built here, but part of what we learned the hard way in Colorado is they had heard kind of the comprehensive strategy, and instead they launched the school safety tip line. So they launched a statewide tip line with posters in every school, and after 3 years and follow-up of research, it was deemed to not be successful. With minimal numbers of reports, it really didn't engage young people, so we had to get back to a comprehensive approach. You also need to be aware that if you over-advertise and get reports on just everything, and you're not taking the time for that live screening and filtering and gathering all the information necessary, there's a lot of points to doing that, and one of those is to weed out somebody that might be false reporting or using it as a tool for harassment. So by engaging in that two-way dialogue, it is extremely important. So let's just go through. We did establish that multidiscipline, and that's where the overlay. Here's step 3 of the Secret Service Guide: establish a central reporting system. That's really the vortex. For us, we had not only systems that were just local to a sheriff's department that were successful, but also a statewide framework. And the statewide framework provided consistency and a vortex for sharing information, because let's face it, we really don't have jurisdictional boundaries anymore. As we look at social media and acts of violence, it can be one of our most recent prevented school attacks was a report that came out of California through an FBI tip line. So the point is that those are getting routed in a timely manner to the people that are boots on the ground, the local law enforcement and school teams. Just a snapshot to give you an idea of how this grew in the beginning: 16,000 reports. That's when we really got down to really involving social media and a mobile app. But what type of reports? What we have seen overall is the #1 thing that young people report. I mean, this data, you can't make it up. What they report is a friend that's suicidal. Is that a concern to us? Because someone that's suicidal can also be homicidal. We can all agree that there needs to be an intervention. Drugs were #2 at this time. Bullying was high, cutting, depression, a lot of mental health issues that are being reported. Therefore, the multidiscipline response is really critical, and the ability to communicate on a Friday or Saturday evening when a report's coming in with local law enforcement dispatchers. So I'll give you a little screenshot of how that works as well. You'll see planned school attacks at this point. I think there's probably more research to be done on Colorado, and for us, the history of mass shootings is I don't think something I ever thought I would experience going in, or my father when he said, over my dead body will my daughter be a cop. He did let that go, but we've seen unspeakable things, and we continue to see these tragedies unfold. For us in Colorado, it's front and center, and it continues to be a highly reported incident of specifically planned school attacks. So threshold, I think, is a big one. And this is again in that Secret Service guide, but overlaying that is, what is the threshold we're asking young people to report? And we keep it very low, a concern to their safety or the safety of others. And I will tell you that in many of our cases, one of the examples is after a tragic car accident, we really beefed up our crisis response in the field. It was tragic. There were 2 children that died in 2 days. It was in a rural community, but we really robustly worked with the crisis team to make sure young people knew they could report anyone that was struggling in the aftermath of that tragedy, because there were resources and we didn't want someone to struggle unnecessarily. They reported a 5th grader that was really struggling, and they said she really didn't like going home or on snow days, which we tend to have a lot of. So there was a concern, and the counselor did just a phenomenal job. And at the end, she said, is there anything I didn't ask you that you'd like to tell me? Because that's one of the things I really work with counselors, similar to investigations. And the little girl started to open up about her parents allowing people to have sex with her and her kindergarten brother in exchange for drugs. That case resulted in both parents going to prison for life and both children being adopted out. So the smallest of reports in the intervention, you never know what is going to come out of that. So I'm going to move into this next one. And this is like my chaotic, like I'm always writing notes, but these are some of my core things. People will question who needs to know. And I would say that multidiscipline team at the school must be multidisciplined. Too many of our cases, including in the early days with Columbine, is when a report only goes to a single authority like the principal, it can often be swept under the rug or ignored. And that multidiscipline to really determine who takes the lead on intervention is critical to the success of this. Police response is also critical. Many people say, how do we get around? And there are ways to add additional layers. And I'll give a tag out to Nebraska here in a little bit on one of those pilots, but who else is going to go on Friday night when we're getting a report of someone that's posted a Snapchat video with a gun or with a suicidal threat? It is going to be law enforcement checking the welfare, or maybe a crisis intervention team. But what's even more critical is if that report comes in, is that we can feed necessary information from that school team to that law enforcement dispatcher about something we might know. For example, we had one in the middle of the night recently, and we were able to say, hey, when officers get on scene, the counselor has said that the stepdad is a big concern for possible abuse of this child. So please try to separate the child from the stepdad when you're trying to garner information. So that's the kind of great information sharing that happens in the process of a robust system. All of these things are really important, but I want to move to this. And I'm going to take you back because, we learned so much from people that have survived these things. But I want to give you this, because for me, where we are now, it's still very similar to what we have to do to prevent it. And I'll give you this scenario because this is really, I'm just going to let's watch this video.
Dust particles started to fall from the ceiling and the ground was shaking. That's when we knew it was pretty real.
It was April 20th, 1999 in Littleton, Colorado. Pat Ireland was a junior in high school.
My head, it came above the table just maybe an inch or two. And as soon as I did that, the gunman saw me off from the distance, and that's when I was hit. I was shot twice in the head and once in the foot.
The Columbine massacre horrified and changed a nation. Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris killed 13 and injured 24. Patrick Ireland was shot 3 times. With 2 bullets in his head and paralyzed on one side, he found the strength to escape out the window.
The SWAT team shouted at me from a distance to stay there and to hang on, and they would come get me.
The image of his escape played out for the whole world to watch. He was rushed to the hospital.
When I was in the ambulance, there was a number of times where they were just, asking me question after question about who I was, what my name was, if I could remember my parents' names.
Emergency surgery to save his life lasted for hours. They removed a bullet in his forehead, but the other was deeply lodged in the left half of his brain, so they left it there. His parents were told he might never walk or talk again.
Here is Pat working with Sarah.
But soon he was proving them wrong.
The brain is really an amazing thing, and the fact that it was able to recreate a lot of those pathways I was very fortunate.
He had to learn not only how to walk, but to talk and write over months of rehabilitation.
I feel really fortunate to be in the position that I'm in now. Through everything that had happened, I probably wouldn't have gone to the school that I went to, and as a result, I probably wouldn't have met my wife, probably wouldn't have gone into the career that I went into.
Pat is a managing director working in finance. He and his wife, Casey, have an 8-month-old little girl. He says if his past is any indication, Giffords has a good chance of recovery.
Hold on just a second here. So part of what his story is so inspiring, and so many people that are the warriors out there that have survived these, but you have to be taken back. I had 2 cousins in that school. Part is what information did we not pay attention to? And really we're coming up on 25 years where some of those records will be unsealed for those of us that worked in that case. But until then, there's still more to come in the lessons learned. We know that responsibilities in school do mean that we have to provide a safe. This screenshot is really the components of what we put together with Safe to Tell. And keep in mind that Safe to Tell was from the ground up. It was built as a nonprofit. It was $100,000 a year, and that's what we operated on. And we built it. I was the special agent for Department of Public Safety for the state at the time, and then also the founding nonprofit director. And it took a lot of people to support it, but training and education was key. How do we make sure that we were engaging staff members and students to know that they were part of the solution? So how we market it is really important, and how we talk to young people, similar to like we did in DARE or as SROs in law enforcement education, is talking to them about consequences and when to speak up, that they don't have to vet it if there's a concern, and if they need to be protected or anonymous, that there is something that is legally to that standard, and that's what this is. As we go through, we then built and brought in a company that had done the tips for Crime Stoppers, and that was Kevin Anderson. He had then built P3. So we brought him in as the first, and we really put all our intellectual property into building that system with him, in knowing that he could then sell it, and has. And really what we wanted was a mobile app. So where we really approached this was making sure there was a unique login and password. There were fields to prompt for information. There were categories and drop downs. There was a live 2-way dialogue feature. And if it was a life safety event, that alert allowed us to push it into the field, into the comm center. And part of it was just bringing down all of the silos, like bringing down the walls, because let me tell you, Colorado, we had to bring down, this goes to the local level law enforcement agency and the local multidiscipline team at the school. And that is really important to know. They're the ones that are going to know this best. But that took a lot of building trust and working together in partnership and collaboration to make that happen. And so that took a lot of invested leaders in this state. There's other states we've helped. There's Courage to Report in Missouri. I mean, you can name it all over the country. Here's Safe to Help Illinois, which is going to be going. Safe to Help Nebraska. And one of the things that you're seeing there is they are really making it go through their crisis line, so that there is a layer and a triage before law enforcement's decided whether to respond. It is more expensive, but what it does is it provides an added layer. So that pilot launched on an individual level in Omaha, and then now is going to be going statewide next year. So I just wanted to give you this too. Like when we look at some of these features, and I'll blow it up for you, it was really interesting, and we still monitor this in every state. How are young people choosing to use it? So clearly, number one thing that they're using is a method of technology to make the report. And I would just say that there's still an uncomfortable, or maybe even a growing uncomfort with talking on the phone with someone, especially for younger generations. So they are going to be using their PC web browser, their mobile web browser, or the mobile app direct. So we still would think that people would more likely use the Safe to Tell mobile app, but if they're concerned with anonymity, they may decide to use that other method. When we look at what type of reports, and this gets changed, we have to continually assess and make things better. But keep in mind, like we have down here only a 12 for fire starting, yet fire starting can be a precipitator for violent behavior. So it's very important that you make sure what your categories are and then what leads to a risk or threat assessment. Because the whole part of this process is not that young people report it, but there is timely sharing of the information to the appropriate locations at the local level. And also there's accountability and follow-up that not only are young people going to report something, but there are going to be trusted adults that do something. So this kind of brings you down to guns in school, 355, simple welfare checks, sexting. The other thing we had to augment was really, how do we train those that take reports live and continue to do it? We want to be able to tell them if it's something on social media, how can they safely screenshot it? They know very likely that if they're in Snapchat and they decide to go in there and screenshot it, that person's going to be alerted that they screenshotted it with their device. So it's important that we say, hey, grab an iPad or a different device and use that second device while you have the image up, and then take a photo of it, not necessarily a screenshot. So making sure that the people that take these reports are well versed in that. And I think that's where the professional development comes in, to really making sure that they know how to gather information, engage young people. And it's just amazing how much people will give you if you ask. What is their username on Instagram is critical for us as being boots on the ground on how we follow up, and being able to see that from the position I'm in now, working through the local level. So I still will go back to, people say law enforcement must be part of this. I really believed the answering point had to be at law enforcement, because too often if it is a life safety event, and there are so many of those, they can directly let someone know, they can directly connect the right dots. And, in those cases, timeliness of response is critical, especially if we're talking school shooting. It's in progress right now. Young people might use this method. We've even got teachers in a lockdown situation using this because they know it goes to a live answering point, and it's a silent method of communication. So how it works, this screenshot will be in the presentation so you can see it. The first you've got to have is the boots on the ground report the concern. And I know we can get ahead of ourselves, but we can't do a risk or threat assessment if we don't know what's going on. So bringing it to our attention should be strongly encouraged. It should be promoted in a culture and climate where this is an important and essential component, is empowering, engaging young people. In Colorado, it went to our law enforcement agency that existed initially, and then it allowed us to stand up our watch center and the fusion center, where 80% of their responsibility was specifically for school safety and tip reports. So that's really where it came through. How it comes in, intelligent, the multidiscipline, credible versus non-credible can be included. Oh, there was laughter in the background, but sometimes it's still going to take that follow-up. We already had to build a registered team in every school in the state, charter, local, private. Sadly, I always was shocked that, we really didn't have that. The State Department of Education didn't have that. That's something that should exist, because it really is way more efficient and saves you a lot of time on so many levels. When there is law enforcement sent and they come to the scene, there's also the school team that can follow up. And that really is the goal, that information shared. If a student's in crisis, if they assessed their welfare and took them in for a medical hold or to a hospital, that is shared back with the team so they can prepare with their arrival. In our district, we have what we call radar, and every week we meet and we discuss kids that are on the radar. And that system is, where are they? Okay, here's what's primarily going on. They have somebody with a severe medical condition in their family. Here are the other siblings that we need to check in with. And we really kind of expand who needs to be on our radar based on what we learn the stressors are in the family. So this kind of gets you back. This is a really critical part that was built into the system, and that is the disposition and outcome. So no longer, so when a report goes out, we want to know what happened and what actions took place. So I took the liberty of screenshotting some reports. Here's one coming in on a self-harm. What you'll see scrolling before is everybody jurisdictionally gets their reports and has a history of them. But then what you get is you have these tabs at the top. You have this is the main information coming in. This is the disposition. This information shows who is communicating. Even right here, I was able to submit a note that goes right to the police comm center in this jurisdiction. Please have responders call me, provide us an update. School leadership will follow up and is working with this student. Thank you. So over here, there's checklists. Was law enforcement? It wasn't a law enforcement only issue, but parents were notified. If there's a check, if there's a welfare, an arrest, and we even get as detailed as was there a risk or threat assessment done? This is all protected information by law in Colorado, which I also think is extremely important in the fidelity of a system, because this can only be shared with those that are need to know. They are told not to print the reports, not to share the reports. These are not corable open record source information, but as a school district, I can even go into the school districts. I'm part of the team, and I can go in a history of all reports we've had since the inception of the program, or even search those reports for any like continuity or information. Who has audit, who read the report, if someone printed it, we exactly know who opened it and who looked at it. So if we get into digital assessment, if I had a magic wand, which I often think I do, I would really want, I think it is really hard for schools, as much as I love training them with Safer Schools Together on digital assessments and what we can do through open record searches, is our team at that fusion level, or those analysts, should be well trained in, if there's something happening on digital media, how they can maybe grab some images, share that with those at the local level. We deal with, Colorado's an example of 70% rural law enforcement or school districts. You're not going to get a lot of people that'll have that as a resource, but we can provide some fidelity and advanced services at that state level that can be really a benefit. I really think that many of these lead to our threat assessment, risk assessment process, in many cases a digital assessment process, and then how we manage someone that is either a threat to themselves or others. Is part of the process of what we have to really discuss. There really are no jurisdictional boundaries. In the years of doing this, I remember after Parkland, getting a report coming out of a nearby community that came into Safe to Tell. And that just shows me that young people will really quickly look at what's a protected way to share information. And they would tap into Colorado's system early on before other systems were in place around the country. To me, there should still be an improvement where we have an infrastructure that connects all state reporting systems, because there's a level of credibility and reporting through that. With the FBI system, you know, they can get a report in California, but you know, if you have a state system like this, they're going to be able to route it through that state system in a much more timely and efficient process. So we really need to more robustly look at that infrastructure that needs to. I mentioned Dr. Del Elliott, like what amazing mentor he is. He's now since retired, and now it's Dr. Beverly Kingston. But he, in many cases, had to address Congress, especially after tragedies like Newtown, Connecticut, at Sandy Hook, or others. And I often got to just go and be in the audience with him. But, you know, briefing as we've gone through this at the Federal Commission of what's working and what's not, it's really important, because sometimes in the aftermath, we for example had the STEM tragedy, which we'll be talking about this summer as the case wraps up in court. But when you look at it, you'll have money coming your way with county commissioners wanting to put in metal detectors. And really, what is the most efficient use from a research-based perspective on a comprehensive school safety strategy? And that's where we really need to educate those that are spending money on some of these studies from the Secret Service, from NIJ, the COPS Office, BJA. These studies really should be integrated, because they are creating a standard of care that should be across our nation. I keep pushing the wrong button. I guess I have to go back. Well, let's try this. Okay, that's why. So that's where we were in 1999. I just want to remind you, we've come a long way, baby. This is when we went to the moon. We took 5 photos, but kids today, they go to the bathroom, they check out their appearance. It's a good lighting in a car. I have 2 daughters that 37 pictures could easily be taken. This is what everybody has their phone. People are taking those things. So you have to be ready to take those reports. Any system that does not allow you to receive a screenshot, a video, or limits the size of it, you need to rethink it. Because when we ask for that information, we will have young people sending us multiple videos, multiple screenshots on multiple social media platforms. And I certainly am not a generation with a technological expertise, but I have learned to navigate that. And I mean, whether it's Discord or TikTok or whatever video, your platform has to be able to receive it in that manner. And I think sometimes states go into saying the magic sauce or the secret sauce is to have a tip line, but there's components that can get you in trouble if you're not very thorough in what's going to work as much as you're going to need it to. Calculating those that end up in a threat assessment, risk assessment, or digital assessment then need to move on to a threat management strategy. And that is so important to think about how you're going to do that and how you're going to integrate it at the local level. Schools have gotten really great at this, but they're also needing a lot of education about what that looks like. They could have a situation and it may be the only situation they had that year. It really depends on the size of the school and where they're located. So having technical assistance and support is so important. And I know we have that at the national level, a lot of movement there. But here's some of the cases that have come through. We've had cases live coming in from a party where, we would prefer them to call 911. I mean, frankly, but are we going to say hang up and call 911? No, we are going to do what we need to do. Take the information they're providing us because they're calling an anonymous method of reporting for a reason. And so whether it's something that is an indicator that a kid is saying goodbye to classmates, we have had cases where it's coming in live and the SRO is running to the scene and we have a kid ready to jump from a building. So I can tell you case after case of successes. I think that really everybody was amazed at, and really what are you missing if you don't have something as robust as this? I also have gone into many communities and states to help them because they may have had a system in place and they might have had data presented to them, but they really didn't do a deep dive. Is this really quality and fidelity information that we're responding to? You have to be really careful if you have a vendor that's supplying a reporting line that it's really the quality that you think it is of what you're getting. So I think it's important to continually assess. With mobile apps and reports come Wi-Fi and battery life. So many of the school folks know that there's all these things that young people need. But this has become ever more the case. And so for all of us that have had cases where, we can train as if we're going to have Wi-Fi, but let me tell you, in some of our recent cases, suddenly we didn't have Wi-Fi and you still have to be able to be prepared to go to the paper pencil method in your response. But this significantly is true that this is young people today and they will use your mobile app, they will use your system. But don't make it frustrating that it doesn't have the capabilities that they need to give you information. I'm trying to see how I'm doing on time. Okay, I think we're okay. These are some live cases that, unfortunately, we have examples of cases. This is a girl passed out unconscious being swung by her arms and legs. These are 2 football players. This case went to national attention, but you only have to think that no one reported this. This all came about after when the victim reported what had happened to her the following day. And for everybody involved that was at this party filming this event, you would only hope that they had had some type of education, engagement training on what their responsibility is in being a good witness and how to report something like this, because they should right away recognize this could have lots of consequences. Someone could die from an alcohol overdose, and they have. Someone could do this. What are the risky things that our children get involved in that haven't really been talked about in a neutral way? I worry because I was the DARE officer. We built from the ground up, and similarly to DARE, really conversation jumpstarts for the classroom to jumpstart the conversation. And this was one that had to be in there because we lose children every year that drink and don't get help and don't wake up. You can look up images of kids that die with Sharpie markered faces because their colleagues or their peers thought it was funny. We've got to raise awareness. When do you report something? Because we need to get an adult's help. And what are the barriers to reporting in a scenario like this? If you're a football player and you're here, you want it to be a code of silence because in their mind, if someone speaks up, we're at a party where alcohol's involved. We could not get a play. So we get a lot of reports about young people in endangered situations with alcohol or drugs at a party. And sometimes the report will come in that someone needs help where they're at, and maybe the whole party's cleared out, but we can get the right people there to the scene. So you have to have a framework that prepares you for those things. Also, from school administrator perspective, is when you get a report or screenshots that are coming in that someone has shared on social media, what I really need to be asking people is, okay, thank you. You're sharing screenshots with me that you're taking. Who is posting that on social media? Because there is like a culpability and a complicity for the person that was there watching the event, posting it, enticing the fight, whatever. You really need to look at that in the correct context. Do we have any questions? Because I feel like I haven't paused at all. Should I keep going?
We do have a few questions, but if you have a little more information you'd like to share with us, go for it. Maybe another 5 or 7 minutes.
Okay, I'm going to keep going. So part of me, for any of you that know Teresa Campbell out of Safer Schools Together, I mean, we've been friends. And Jeff, by the way, worked for the FBI behavioral unit. I don't know why he left Colorado, but I had the option to work with Jeff. I mean, some of us go way back. But this is what, and I have 3 kids. My youngest is now 18. So, a lot of this I wanted so badly as a mom while they were growing up. It couldn't be fast enough because, we all know we want to keep our little ones safe. They're our most natural, our most precious resource. But what I really had to learn is Snapchat. Snapchat is a great tool. If you don't know it, you need to get on it. It's one of the primary things young people use. Then you've got TikTok. You've got all of these things. Are there risks? Yes. But to me, the biggest risk is not understanding the way they communicate. So I would say that I think a strong augmenting factor for anyone that has a program like this is making sure that there is a team of individuals well-versed in what open records they can find as intelligence is coming in. What do they need to do to find any screenshots coming out? And I mean, sadly, even with the Boulder shooting, I wasn't going to be able to get there, but what I could do was cast a net over that area and see the live videos coming out. Not that you want to see that because you can't unsee that stuff, but from what we do, from a law enforcement intelligence, we have got to look at what we can do as things are breaking, or if it doesn't get to the point where we're really doing, type of a search warrant, because that's going to take more time. So what's live open records? The screenshotting ability, the different device, I already went through. So this is the digital. We get a lot of this. Recognizing the method, like right there, that black bar across, that tells me when I train people that take these reports, right there, it's a Snapchat report. And what I need is the name, the username right there. Because if we're going to start open record searching, that's where we have to ask the right questions. And Lena's on here, Jeff's on here, I don't even know who else, but that's why we're trying to build into a more structured process of risk and threat assessment, that you ask these types of questions so that it doesn't just go unasked, because, from your mindset, it has to be on there so you know what information to gather. Really concerned about exposure and contagion, because these cases, if you're getting it in live and someone's reporting it to you, there's probably hundreds of other people that are getting those same images. So really assessing how traumatic is it for your call center staff, Your comm center, then it's going to get transferred to your dispatch center as law enforcement are responding in the field. It's important that they see those videos because they are going to be describing to the officers responding what they need to know. But we do have to be aware, if you're seeing it, so are many others, because this has gone out on social media, and exposure and contagion is going to be very high for those that manage this in the aftermath. You also need to recognize what is going on and that could be viral in social media. For me, this is something that is a core training component if you're establishing a system or if you have one in place that needs to be enhanced to the next level. And that is recognizing what is a viral social media post that is not an original picture. So many of you might remember a few years ago, we had a lot of clown threats coming in. So if a clown threat was coming in, I needed to make sure I was keeping people abreast of what were the viral posts on social media and what were they looking for that would be different. If they had a picture of 3 students and could tell that that was a photo that was not the viral post, it would help them to identify a higher credibility of intelligence coming in. So it's really important to keep up with that, or having someone on your team that's very savvy at that. I mean, I personally would have just rather had someone on my team that did all that for me, but I ended up having to do it because we just didn't have enough people. The other thing is when people, the blue whale, the signs of suicide, what's trending on social media, what kind of things, when 13 Reasons Why happened, we were getting reports nonstop. And right now in Colorado, we know, and I think that Lena probably went over that, this pause in academic in-person learning is a really dangerous time. Social stressors are at an all-time high, but really in the aftermath of any mass shooting, there are no jurisdictional boundaries when media portrays that, and I think we all have to be on heightened alert. This is more from the Secret Service, but I'm going to just kind of walk through this. But what are the behavioral things? Harassing. But this is really important because on several of my law enforcement chiefs calls, they wanted to say, how do we make sure that law enforcement only gets reports that are at a higher threshold level? Well, it really doesn't work like that in a school-based program, because what we know is these are some of the behavioral things we have to pay attention to. So I would really just get your mind around, you're going to move to a lower threshold, but if it goes to the multidiscipline team at the school and it can wait till a Monday or Tuesday, law enforcement doesn't need to roll. But the communication is still going to be sent, and updated communication, but it doesn't mean that you're going to have to respond. What you're going to want is to have a robust system of intercommunication with the team that's saying, no, we're going to follow up on Monday, or being able to see those reports. And I'd say that there was some resistance for me from dispatch centers. And early in my years, I did work 911 when I was an engineer, enhanced 911. That's what I was like, why am I doing this? I want to be out there. I want to be a police officer. But honestly, it just, there might be some reluctance at first, but then they realize how efficient the system is. It really allows for that communication. It saves them from having to wake up a school principal or call somebody. They only have to do that if no one responds. I'm just going to keep going here because that's the end. So really the conveyance of the communication, just want to make sure I'm at the end here. The in-person or an online posting, these are the things, again, from the Secret Service. If there was imminence to attack, what does that mean? And that means just communicating, and there's that in-person or that online posting. So if they're hearing it one-on-one, will they do something? And we have a history in this country of people, we know what happened in the aftermath and in the investigative process, but how do we ensure that young people are well-versed? And that is not going to come without education in the classroom at an age-appropriate level, making sure that you're having the conversation at age-appropriate levels about safety, about online, and about what they can be empowered to do. In higher violent communities where we've had CDC initiatives like our Montbello community, the code of silence is higher. So it may be a higher barrier to break through. and change the mindset. So you have to start young, because you also have to develop trust, because they will question the trust of the anonymity. And you have to protect the person that made the report. That doesn't mean you can't take the intelligence that you're getting in the information and respond and react. And so with that, I would just say that there's so much more that surrounds this, but there's so many people, at least in my career, that I've had the fortune of working with, so many wonderful leaders that were willing to say, we're going to pull these barriers down and we're going to get this done. It's totally doable. Here we are 21 years after Columbine or more. So with that, I think I'll move to questions.
Susan, thank you so much. We do have a couple of questions in the chat box. I'm going to get to them in just one second, but I had two of my own. The first one is, so with Safe to Tell in Colorado, you went from a situation where there was major underreporting, underutilization, to one now where it is maximum utilization. What made the difference? What changed?
Well, and personally, I would say I was the only, we started it from the ground up with the Center for the Study and Prevention of Violence and the attorney. So we involved partners from the beginning, but we were really trying to prove that it would work, and we piloted it. So then once we went statewide and just really flipped the switch, we had that opportunity to pilot it first. Plus, we were building it from the ground up, integrating a comprehensive approach of school safety, because it was really meant to turn into the school safety center with reporting involved. So I would say that it does come down to resources and financial commitment. It's not done for free. We tried to do it with very little funding to build it. We saw success because if you could just save one, if anybody said one, but we had many more than that. So I think the deliberate effort to provide sustainable funding, because up till then it was, golf tournaments, donations, it just wasn't enough funding, and it was existing resources. So you need to be deliberate about what the costs are going to be for a state to not only run legislation, and that's what we've done at many of speaking to the legislatures or going out to different states that are looking at this, is really educating them why they have to spend this baseline. But for me, even just being on scene of two of these mass shootings, the Boulder one, is we spend a fortune on what we do in response. And I do think it's a question is, what is our investment in efforts of prevention and early intervention? And this is one of them.
And Susan, I recall in other presentations and us working together, you've talked about how you can't, one of the things that shifted in Colorado was that you went from a model where you were just posting, putting up posters all over schools with Safe to Tell Colorado on it. That wasn't enough. That you had to look at the culture and climate of the school, you had to build trust with the students, and you had to train them on what the indicators were, what the concerning behaviors were that you wanted them to report. And that once you started doing that on a more personal level, things did start to shift. Is that right?
And that is so true. It was really you could really see the difference in communities that, deliberately made sure that they were doing education and health class and using the classroom discussions. Again, that magic wand would be that we really need to build some very robust curriculum about the issues facing young people, and a series of classroom education for them in health class that goes beyond, sex education, but really into the issues they're going to face as a young person, and make sure that they're prepared when it happens, or if it happens, what their next steps are. So you're exactly right. The education and awareness was critical that happened.
Thank you. Moving to the chat box, Susan, the first question, and you sort of addressed it here a minute ago, but you may want to expand on your answer. The first question, how do you overcome Black, Indigenous, people of color students and families' mistrust of law enforcement with the anonymous reporting system that they know goes to law enforcement, or even those that appear to go to law enforcement? How do you overcome that mistrust?
Well, okay, that's a good question, because right now with what's happening in our country, I think that's a big issue. We did see that we had a I was a small part of a Center for Disease Control grant with the university, and that was in the Montbello community, and really engaging stakeholders and partners. I think there's some interest in doing a community version of that where more like the resources in that local community for success. I still think law enforcement is going to have a layer, or that reports that need a law enforcement response are going to have to be transferred deliberately. But it could be that I think that one of the grants that was written was to make sure that the faith-based community, the social supports in that community, that there was sort of a community-based response team. But you still have to have a live answering point. You still have to have the information shared in a timely way, and you still have to plan if it requires an emergency response, because you will get them. And I mean, that's the same thing with 911, is people are reluctant to use 911 or their cell phone because they know it's registering with them. So I think we get delays in reporting for that very reason as well. But, to me, looking at some of these communities to build trust. And here's what I would say. We still got reports. There was not one school in Colorado that we didn't get reports from. 100% of all schools had reports. So it shows you that even a private school that's not doing curriculum, or somebody that is not having that discussion in the classroom, but for the staff in those schools that were in a higher risk community, they were talking about with young people, and they still would get reports. It's just that there still is a strong code of silence in that community for that very issue, Jeff. I think that's where we have to decide. Certainly after the Boulder shooting, a lot of people are saying, how do we more robustly provide a community version of this?
Yes, I think what I hear, and I know from other presentations, what I'm hearing too, Susan, is that so it's really critical as states and school districts look to create an anonymous reporting system, that they do involve voices from disadvantaged and marginalized communities in building that system, so that they do have some buy-in. And I suppose too that the messenger in each school matters as well. One last question, Susan, from the chat box, and then we'll wrap up. Many school districts are removing SROs completely. Do you feel those schools can still have a successful anonymous reporting system and threat assessment team by only asking for police assistance review for the weapons threats to school threats to others? What research best supports law enforcement presence in schools and on the threat assessment teams? To that last point, Susan, before you answer, to that last point, I know that probably later this week, the COPS office is actually be releasing, the Office of Community Oriented Policing Services is going to be releasing a report on SROs in schools, on the various roles that they play, how those roles sort of dictate the actions that SROs take, and what is their efficacy. So there is some research coming out even this week on that. But Susan, could you address the issue about SROs and involving them?
Well, and there's quite a few answers, but what I can say just from running this is we don't have SROs in every school. So, I mean, it's actually a minority of schools that have SROs in them. So this operated with or without an SRO. Do I believe that SROs are critical? Yes, I really get concerned. And I know that some of our survivors from Columbine are now parents with multiple children in a school district in Colorado that decided to take SROs out of the school. So I think there's a lot of concern with liability on that as well, because at our STEM shooting, the SRO, the principal or the CEO had that SRO, decided not to have an SRO and to bring in a private security person. So I think there's a lot of lessons learned where that was a challenge that has a long conversation. So despite going down that pathway, I would say this is something that operates with or without a SRO. However, when you have an SRO available, they can immediately check things that other people cannot. Law enforcement has access to records like utility records, premise history checks, things that are critical to the threat assessment team. And if you do not have an SRO, I hope you have an adopt-a-cop or someone that you can bring into your school to be part of your risk or threat assessment team. And on this last note, I would say that my other dream was handle with care of having a method if law enforcement responds to a scene or a fight that they could then reverse send a communication to the school team. Hey, these kids were involved in this over the weekend. Be aware on Monday morning. So we've kind of built our own systems around that, but that's the other part of this, is just sharing information and communication in a deliberate way to do so.
Thank you, Susan. Before we go ahead and turn it back to Christy, I did want to point out to people too that on this topic, just yesterday, the Department of Homeland Security released a public awareness bulletin. It's called Mitigating the Threat of School Violence as the U.S. Returns to Normal from the COVID-19 Pandemic and Beyond. This should be on the DHS website. I will make sure that Christy Barksdale at the Sheriff Association has it. If you don't find it on the DHS website, please. Yes. Okay. Yeah, I have it right here too. I'll get this to Christy. Please reach out to Christy if you have any trouble getting a hold of it. I know a lot of us are pretty zoomed out, so it's really gratifying to see so many of our colleagues joining us today. Thank you. Thank you, Susan, for sharing your time and insights with us. Very valuable. Finally, thanks to Christy Barksdale and the staff of the National Sheriff's Association for their awesome coordination of this event, and of course the COPS office for making it possible. We've now done 4 webinars. This is the last one, I'm sad to say, in this series. But as Christy pointed out, these webinars are available to you on the National Sheriff's Association website. With that, I'll turn it back to Christy Barksdale. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Jeff. And I second that. A huge thank you to Susan and the COPS office for all making this webinar possible. And thank you to our participants for joining today. Please email me at kbarksdale@sheriffs.org with any questions. Thank you all for joining and have a nice day.